Let's start first off with correcting motivation. Like before, we're going to correct the motivation with refuge and bodhicitta. Um, as some of you may know, I grew up in Israel, so I still have family in Israel. So there's a war raging now in Israel and Iran, all across the Middle East, but also other wars happening around the world. And in having conversations with people, with friends from all over the world, I think that people are trying to grasp what's going on, to grapple with those different situations. And most people are, or many people that I'm having conversations with, are trying to narrow things down to one reason or two reasons why people are fighting. But the way that I tend to look at it in putting on my Buddhist classes is to recognize that when a certain result comes into fruition, we say that result, first of all, depend upon cause and conditions. We all know that. We speak about karma, right? And karma has different effects. We also say that a result does not come to fruition just for one cause, but there are many causes and conditions contributing to a certain result. And result does not come up depending upon cause and conditions which are incompatible with it. It has to come to fruition from compatible cause and conditions, which means that karma is multifaceted, multi-layered, and it's very difficult to understand these karmatic systems. So when I think of how to hope for a good future, brighter future, was in a very loose sense. If people were peaceful and happy with themselves, we have less conflicts and less wars. But it is likely that conflicts and wars are not going to resolve by themselves or in an easy way. So thinking of what we can do in order to solve conflicts and results, well, we first of all train our mind. The only way in which we can get rid of wars and conflicts is to erase ignorance, to get rid of ignorance from our mind stream. Get rid of ignorance, get rid of anger and attachment and jealousy and pride and a sense of loyalty, which is directed only to our side, and a sense of disconcern for the welfare of others. So a way to solve conflicts would be long term, to get out of cyclic existence, and even more so to help others to free themselves from cyclic existence. So we have a long term plan. We have a long term plan, and I think that if we set long term goals to eliminate ignorance and anger and hostility and so forth, also slowly, short term plans might improve or might progress, will take further steps. Even if we solve the problems in the Middle East now, so long as sentient beings' minds are still governed by ignorance, by anger, by attachment, and so forth, wars and conflicts will arise in other places around the world when we will take rebirth. And so we experience results which are fruitions, results which are environmental results, results similar to the causes. The way to stop experiencing those results is to get out of samsara. And this is what we are doing here. We're finding ways to get out of samsara. Not only finding ways to get out of samsara, but also ways to be of perfect benefit to others. And so we do so in relying upon the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. So today, at the beginning of our session, let's first of all take maybe a few minutes just to create some space in our mind before we go for refuge and arouse bodhicitta. And we're going to think, I think, particularly in relation to refuge and bodhicitta, that we're here to implement a long-term plan in which we're going to develop our potential activate our Buddha lineage, our Buddha potential, so that long term we'd be able to be of greater help and greater benefit to others, freeing ourselves from samsara, but also having a better capacity and ability to lead other people, other living beings outside of the great samsaric oceans of wars, conflicts, famine, and suffering. So let's take a few seconds to calm our mind. Starting with Shine, Shamatha, home abiding, and counting a round of 21 breaths, cultivating mindfulness and vigilance, which will act as a basis for developing the wisdom of emptiness. And visualizing the Buddha in front of us as we're surrounded by myriad, limitless living beings, countless. Trying to think that we have had connections with everyone around us since time without beginning up until now. We don't remember how we were related to others, but we can think that just as in this life we were born to a mother that cared for us, into a family constellation, in a community, in a society that contributed to our survival and our development and our growth. Also, in previous lives, we had communities, we had families, with neighbors, with mother and father, human or otherwise. And thinking that all of us are governed by ignorance, by anger, attachment, and other afflictive states that create suffering and problems for ourselves and others. So we think that it is my job now, having been born as a human being with freedoms and richnesses, with access to the Dharma, to spiritual teachers. It is my job now to fully actualize my Buddha potential, to blossom into the state of Buddhahood and lead others to the complete eliminations of their afflictive states of mind, to the state of liberation. And so to do so, we rely upon the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. The Buddha is a teacher. The Dhamma is the actual refuge. And the Sangha are our spiritual teachers, not only current, but also past, from the time of the Buddha up until now, passing the Dhamma from one person to the next, developing in their mind realizations and abandonments of suffering and their causes. In thinking that in the future, I will become Buddha, I will embody the Dhamma, and I will become Sangha, leading others to the state of liberation and enlightenment. And with a sense of reliance in our heart, we'll think, I'll go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dhamma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I'll go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dhamma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I'll go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dhamma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. All right, the sun is shining slowly, slowly in India. And we're gonna go back to the point that we left off in a previous session. We have been speaking of the fourfold reasoning. A reasoning that we use in order to ascertain, to understand emptiness. And so if I put it on a screen just as a reminder. The fourfold reasoning that we use in order to ascertain emptiness begins with identifying the object of negation. And our object of negation, as we've been discussing, is inherent existence, true existence, something existing from its own side. Then we spoke of establishing deprivation, which is establishing the places where we're going to look for the object of negation, the thing that we want to negate. And once we establish that, we refute the option, the possibility of that thing being inherently different from its basis of designation or being inherently one with its basis of designation. And we spoke of the meaning of inherent existence, as Lama Tsongkhapa explained that to be something that exists in terms of its own essence without being posited through the force or through the power of a subjective mind. Everything that appears to our mind appears as if it exists by itself, as if it has its own essence, its own core, its own identity that exists in and of itself, and also makes it be what it is without depending upon anything else, as if it has a completely self-sustaining ability, identity, an entity. So this is what we want to negate. This is our object of negation. More specifically, we spoke about ourselves as persons, as people, how there's a certain identity that appears to our mind, particularly in extreme situations. It's easier to identify it in extreme situations, but it exists in our mind all the time. There is not even a single moment in which ignorance is absent. So the sense of ignorance that designates, that creates, that invents, that believes wholeheartedly in a self-sustaining identity and inherent identity, intrinsic identity, does not only operate on ourselves as people, it also operates in a way that we perceive others around us, but also in a way that we perceive anything else that appears to our senses. Food is, for example, for us, it is either delicious intrinsically, or some types of foods are not delicious intrinsically. Sounds and smells and tastes and visual objects, all of them appear to our senses as if they exist completely in and of themselves. And our ignorance believes wholeheartedly that this is the case, as if they do have an essence, a self-sustaining essence. So this is what we negate. And when we negate, when we identify the object of negation, we want to separate between things, what exists and what does not exist. So all of us exist. I as a person exist. Now, when I experience pain, when I experience pleasure, there is a strong sense of self that appears to my mind. I exist. I do experience happiness and pleasure. So I exist. What doesn't exist is an inherently existing I. So when I identify the object of negation, I'm not negating myself. I'm not negating my own existence. What I'm negating is an inherently existing self, independently existing self. So it's important to make the distinction, because otherwise we might become completely nihilistic in thinking that nothing exists. So what we are negating is an existence of something that has its own essence, that doesn't depend upon anything else, an inherently existing thing. And so in the first step of the fourfold reasoning, we make that sense of self appear strongly to our mind. We can do that also not only with a strong sense of self with respect to ourselves, but also things that we are attached to, things that we hate, things that scare us, things that terrify us. We can make them appear to our mind with that strong appearance of inherent existence, and then try to look for that supposedly inherently existing thing, either irrespective of their basis of designation or inside the basis of designation. Like, for example, if I'm thinking of a Big Mac, or as you say in Australia, Macca. No, in Australia, when you say I'm going to Macca, I'm going to McDonald's, right? So if you think of a Big Mac exists. The basis of designation of a Big Mac is the bun, and that aesthetic piece of meat inside the bun. That's the basis of designation, right? So we have a bun with some lettuce and pickles and a piece of meat inside. And then a mind calls it a Big Mac. It gives it a name. So we look for the Big Mac within its basis of designation. Is a Big Mac, for example, is it the bun? Is it the meat? Is it a pickle? And so on and so forth. We spoke of the way that we look for something within its basis of designation. So if something does inherently exist, it has to be either one with its basis of designation, which means that we'll be able to find it within the basis of designation, or it has to be different and unrelated, disconnected from the basis of designation. And we say that because if something inherently exists, it has to exist independently. It cannot depend upon anything else. It cannot depend upon its basis of designation. If Big Mac inherently exists, it exists completely in and of itself, completely by its own right, by its own power, without depending upon the bun, without depending upon a piece of meat or pickle or lettuce in um, that burger. It has to exist completely from its own side. So it can either be found outside of its basis of designation, unrelated to it, or inside the basis of designation. And we spoke of refuting being inherently different to the base of designation. That's easy. If something is disconnected, unrelated, independent from its basis of designation, you can find it at different locations, irrespective of where the basis of designation is. You know, as if you can, you can buy um, you can buy Big Mac at Macca's, and you get it at the counter, but the beef, the bun, and so forth remain in the oven because it's not a Big Mac would be completely unrelated to its basis of designation. Or, when we speak about ourselves, our basis of designation is mostly the body, but we can also say the mind. So it would mean that you can point at myself being here, or you can point at myself being in a different corner of the room, but the body will be here because I'm unrelated. Kartsön would be unrelated to the base of designation, the body. So that's an absurd consequence. These are absurd consequences, which we use in order to refute the notion of something inherently existing as being disconnected, unrelated, independent from the basis of designation. The more challenging thing would be to refute being one with the basis of designation, as if it is possible to find something within its basis of designation. Like, for example, as if it is possible to find me, the real me, within my body, within my mind. It's more challenging because I think that, first off, we have maybe a natural assumption to think that I do exist within my body or within my mind. There is a certain core or identity that is completely objective, that makes me who I am. And I can feel it. When something drastic happens, when I'm being scared or frightened, when something good happens to me, I do have a physical sensation. Physical sensations appearing in my body, either in my chest or my head or my abdomen and other parts of the body. It makes it seem as if there is a real sense of self that exists within them, and this is who I am. This is the real me. And I'm also independently existing person. So in our previous session, we read from Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life, in which Shantideva says that when you look for the person within the different parts of the body, the teeth, the hair, the nails, and not the self. And here we're looking at trying to find that inherently, independently existing self. This is the essence of who I am. This is the real I am. This is the real Kartsön. So the real Kartsön is not found within the teeth, the hair, the nails. The self is not the bones or blood. The mucus is not it, nor is the phlegm. Neither is the lymph or pus. And also the real Yaki Kartsön is not the fat or sweat. The lungs and liver are also not the self, nor are the other inner organs the self. The self is not the excrement or urine. Thanks God. Sometimes I have shitty days, but the self is not the excrement or urine. The flesh and skin are not the self. The warmth and winds are also not the self. The orifices are not the self. So here Shantideva explains how we look for a sense of self within the body. But also one might think that I'm not the self, but I'm also, what I am. I am my mind. This is the true self. This is the true me. This is who I am. I am my mind. Particularly when we look at that more closely, when we think of who is the person that is creating actions in this life, placing imprints in this life, and experiencing the results in future lives. In a general sense, we say that the thing that travels from one life to the next is our mind. When we die, the body dies, it decomposes, it dissolves, it goes into the elements. So this is also quite easy to assert and trust and believe that I am not my body. And the body is not the thing that travels from one life to the next. But the consciousness does travel from one life to the next. And so maybe the real I of me is my consciousness. Maybe when I create actions in this life and experiences the result of my actions in next life, since what travels from life to life is my consciousness, maybe this is the real I, the real self, that independently existing self. So Shantideva refers to that here. It says also, in all ways, the six primary consciousnesses are also not the self. This is a very unique position of the Madhyamika Prasangika school of thought within Buddhist philosophy. So here, first of all, I start with a disclaimer or a clarification. We haven't had a chance to look at tenets, the different schools of thought within Buddhist philosophy. We often in Tibetan Buddhism present things only from the viewpoint of the Madhyamika Prasangika school of thought, the middle way consequent school of thought. It is the only school of thought within Buddhist philosophy that says that things do not exist inherently. All other philosophies, Buddhist philosophies, assert that things exist inherently. All other philosophy within Buddhism say that if you look for something, you have to find it. If you cannot find it, it doesn't exist. There has to be an essence of something that makes it be what it is. Otherwise, how can it exist? All Buddhist philosophies, apart from the middle way consequence, the Madhyamika Prasangika, say that. And so most Buddhist philosophies say that since the consciousness travels from life to life, not only that, the consciousness is the receptacle for karma. We create an action, we place imprints upon our mind, we say, and those imprints come to fruition in our next life. And therefore, they say, if I look for the real I am me that creates karma, it is my mind. The middle way consequence school of thought refutes that. And this is also what Shantideva refers to here. When we look for the six consciousnesses, they are also not me. We're not refuting the mind going from life to life. The mind does go from life to life. I mean, if we believe, if we trust that past and future lifetimes exist, sometimes it's, or for many of us, including me, it's hard to trust that in 100% assurance. I didn't grow up as Buddhist. Trusting in, believing in past and future lifetime was not part of my cultural conditioning. So it took me, well, a few years, many years to think of past and future lifetimes, to wonder, to investigate, to check whether I can accept the existence of past and future lifetimes. And probably it's still an undergoing process. It's still under construction. And it's okay. It doesn't make me a bad Buddhist to question and to doubt. And so then the middle way consequence school of thought says that, of course, it would be ridiculous to think that the real I or me is my eye consciousness, my nose consciousness, my tongue consciousness, and so forth. Our biggest doubt would be the mental consciousness. Is it the real I? Is it the real me? Particularly because we said that mental consciousness travels from this lifetime to the next. So the Madhyamika Prasanghika also says that the consciousness is not I or me. It is a basis of designation. It is a basis for labeling I or me, but it's not the real I or me. And it says that because there are some absurd consequences, again, that we can use in order to investigate whether consciousness is the real I or me. So, for example, if the person travels from this lifetime to the next is the consciousness, is it the sense consciousnesses or the mental? No. So I spoke about it. I said that it is the mental consciousness that travels from this lifetime to the next. But then consciousness consists of main minds and mental factors. So am I the real person? Am I a main mind? Am I a mental factor? There are 51 mental factors, for example. There are virtuous mental factors, non-virtuous mental factors. There are object ascertaining mental factors, omnipresent mental factors. There are changeable mental factors. There are root afflictions. There are secondary afflictions. Now, within those afflictions, we have anger, attachment, ignorance. Within virtuous mental factors, we have faith and shame and embarrassment. So, if I am a mental factor, which one of them am I? Really, if I look at the mind and also break it down into different components, I cannot find something that I can confidently point at and say, this is the real I or me. Am I a previous moment of consciousness or a latter one? Am I realizing consciousness or a mistaken one? Am I positive, a virtuous consciousness, or a negative state of mind? In all ways, when I look at the mind, I cannot find something that I can point at and to say, this is the real I or me, and inherently, independently, the essence of me that exists within my mind. And therefore, the conclusion that we draw from all this extensive investigation is that if an inherently existing self exists, it has to be found. If it cannot be found to exist independently from its basis of designation, the body and mind, but also I wasn't able to find it within the basis of designation, the body and mind, I exhausted all options. It cannot be found to be one with the body and mind and to be different from the body and mind, and therefore an independently, inherently existent person doesn't exist at all. I've exhausted all options. So again, what we refute is an inherently existent person, not the person themselves. I do not negate that I exist. What I negate is an independently existing self, as if there's Kartsön that exists inherently, independently, truly. And if it was so, if it were so, I would have to exist either independently from my body and mind, because an inherently existing thing is an independent thing. So I would have to exist independently from the body and mind, or within the body and mind, also independently. And so I have negated those two options, and therefore I can conclude that an inherently existing self doesn't exist. And here, a more complicated or tricky thing is what we grapple with, which is resting in the non-finding of an inherently existing self, which, as I spoke of before, is the non-affirming negation. It's a non-affirm negation in which we just negated, for example, an inherently existing self, and we don't affirm or imply anything else in its place. It's so hard for us to rest, to dwell, or to abide within the not finding, because the mind constantly wants something to hold on to. It is looking for something to affirm. It's very difficult for it to remain placed upon just a not finding. So we train, we practice, we think about it. First of all, we study the topic, we think about it, we then practice it in meditation. We combine it together with concentration, the concentration of shamatha, calm abiding. And bit by bit, we can extend the amount of time in which we can just simply rest upon the not finding an inherently existent self. We can extend it from 1 second to 2 seconds to 3 seconds to 5 seconds, 10 seconds, minutes, and so forth. So long as we still continue to develop concentration and wisdom. So if you find it difficult, don't freak out. It does require thinking and also practice. And we have time to do that. Scarlett says, can I please clarify what the other schools are saying? And so the Madhyamika Prasanka school of thought within Buddhist philosophy, actually before that, I'll take a step back. The Buddha turned the wheel of Dharma, we say 3 times. There's the first turning of the wheel, second turning of the wheel, third turning of the wheel. And the people that the Buddha taught were people that came from different walks of life. They had different dispositions, different sets of beliefs. So the Buddha did not teach everyone exactly the same thing. The Buddha taught philosophies that were suited to the dispositions of the audiences that he was communicating with. Then, when you look at the sutras that the Buddha taught, you might find contradictory statements. So you have to think, we have to remind ourselves that the Buddha was speaking to different audiences, and therefore he said things that were different to each other, different to other sutras. Then later on, other Buddhist scholars, Indian scholars, like, for example, Bhava Viveka, other scholars took the teachings of the Buddha, the sutras, and spoke of different philosophical views that the Buddha spoke of. And then the Tibetans came along and created a tenet system that, of course, existed in Indian philosophy, but presented it in a way that is very common at this day and age, dividing Buddhist philosophies into 4 major schools of thought. The first one is called the Great Exposition, or in Sanskrit, the Vaibhashika school of thought. The second school of thought is called the Sautantrika, or the Sutra school of thought. The third school is called the Chittamatra or Yogacara. That's the Mahayana school of thought. Then we have the Madhyamika, or middle way school of thought, which is then divided into 2 sub-schools, middle way autonomy and middle way consequence schools of thought. And so they're arranged in that fashion, going from more basic schools of thought to the most evolved or complicated school of thought, which is the middle way consequence, the Madhyamika Prasanka schools of thought. So all schools of thought, apart from the Madhyamika Prasanka, which means the Great Exposition, the first one, the Vaibhashika, the Sutra school of thought, Sautantrika, Chittamatra, Madhyamika Svatantrika, the middle way autonomy school, all of them say that things inherently exist. Say that there has to be a core of existence that makes something be what it is. Otherwise, how would things exist? But even more so, they say that, for example, if things don't have their own essence, their own identity, how can you call them by their names? Like, for example, if you take a donkey and a pig, if a donkey doesn't have a donkey essence and a pig doesn't have its own essence, if they exist just by verbal designation, you can call a donkey a pig and a pig a donkey, and there would be that. Because they're just verbal designation, they don't have their own essence. So it's only the middle way consequence school of thought that says that if you look for the essence, you're not going to be able to find it. It's just like I said so far. If you look at the body and mind, you cannot find its essence in the body, and you also cannot find that essence in the mind. All other schools of thought say that the essence of ourself, the real person, the real I or me, or I say most of the schools of thought, not all of them, but most of them will say it is the consciousness. This is the thing that travels from one lifetime to the next. And so Tibetan Buddhism is by and large Madhyamika Prasanka Buddhism. It says we're not going to find that sense of self. Also, the mind is not the self. And this is where it becomes more challenging for us. How can we say that something exists if it cannot be found? How can we affirm our existence if I look for something? No, if I look for myself and I cannot find it. So the middle way consequence school of thought that says that we here are working in two ways. When we look for something within its basis of designation, we cannot find it. Or you can say that when you look for it to exist independently from the basis of designation, or within its basis of designation, you cannot find it. If you don't look for it, it can still exist. Karma is tenable, it's admissible, functionality is admissible. Things still function in the world, even if when you look for them, you cannot find them. And so then the Madhyamika Prasanka takes a further step and says things exist merely by name, just by being merely imputed. It does not mean to say that I am only a name. I'm Kartsön or Yaki. No, I'm not just a name, I'm a person. I'm not just a label. I am a person. I'm sometimes happy, sometimes I'm sad, sometimes I'm agitated, sometimes I'm completely comfortable and relaxed. I am a person. I speak, I think, I function, I create karma, I enjoy the fruits of karma. I'm not just a label, but I exist merely by name. So to exist merely by name means that when I look for myself within my body and mind, I'm not going to be able to find it. But I do exist just by mental designation, merely by mental designation. The word mere or just simply by mental designation means that if I'm going to look for the real I or me within my body and mind, I'm not going to be able to find it. I exist, but not objectively, simply subjectively. So Scarlett is saying, so to clarify, only Tibetan Buddhism has the middle way. Zen and Theravada says something else. Also does the yogic of the soul says the soul exists. And going back to Greg's point, that reminds me of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Translate as yoga is the cessation of the perturbation. I so need glasses, reading glasses. Um, Motion, etc., of the mind. So when we stop looking for emptiness, we have stopped the perturbation that are caused by looking for emptiness, and can find emptiness in the sense that we allow it to come to us. Random thinking. All right. So I'll try to combine these two together. So when we look at different, first of all, when we look at different schools of thought within Buddhist philosophy, and also the way that Buddhism functions now around the world, there are different Buddhist traditions around the world. So basically, we can divide the world now, the Buddhist world, into Theravada countries and Mahayana countries. Theravada countries like Sri Lanka, in Myanmar, in Thailand, in Laos, Cambodia. Mahayana countries like Tibet, like Mongolia, like China, Korea, Japan. In all those places, there are also, some that also practice Theravada or some that practice Mahayana. But in general, you can divide the Buddhist world into Mahayana and Theravada. Now, in Tibetan Buddhism, we often speak of Hinayana, Mahayana, and Hinayana. There's some people that equate Hinayana with Theravada. But Hinayana mostly refers to some ancient philosophies, Buddhist philosophies that existed for centuries, um, all across Southeast Asia's. Of them, the Theravada philosophy and also it's a living form of Buddhism survived up until the present day. So the philosophical views are mostly Hinayana views. So you have those Hinayana views or Theravada views in places like Myanmar and Sri Lanka um, and Thailand and so forth. And then you have Mahayana views. Um, and some of them are Yogacara or mind-only school in places like, some places like, or some traditions which are Chinese traditions, Chen tradition, for example. And there are also Madhyamika Prasanka views existing, middle way consequence school of thought, views existing in those places, like, again, in China. There are many Chinese traditions which are students of Nagarjuna interpreting Nagarjuna according to the middle way consequence school of thought. So, that exists within Japan or China, and definitely in Tibet and Mongolia and so forth. And so, different Buddhist countries relate or study different philosophies as the main philosophies. Tibetan Buddhism is by and large Madhyamika Prasanka, middle way consequence school of thought Buddhism. And so, going back to Greg's point, when we stop looking for emptiness, we have stopped the perturbations that are caused by looking for emptiness. Can we find emptiness in the sense that we allow it to come to us? So I'm not sure that I'm totally getting your philosophizing, Greg, but basically, if I think of what Lama Tsongkhapa says in his, for example, insight section of the Lamrim Chemo, it says that some mistake emptiness to be not thinking of anything, trying to suspend all thoughts, as if we empty our mind from all thoughts. In that sense, maybe it's like allowing emptiness to come to us or inviting it in. So Lama Tsongkhapa vehemently refutes that to be a meditation on emptiness. Just a second. 또 에셰딜라 추주 개발라 차게레 지는 그란소 쇼자 동가 칼레칼레 마 용기 네 그란소 만니와 이나가 셴발라 되나 디그레 아니 렘버체 데란디 카딜 나나 야고 요레 Also to check. Okay. And so then, I'm sharing a room with my teacher. He's going breakfast, and I'm staying hungry with you guys. I'm not gonna kind of guilt trip you forever, but just to let you know, you guys make me hungry. Anyway, no, I'm just joking. Um, And so, um, so Lama Tsongkhapa vehemently refutes the notion of not doing anything with our mind, not investigating, not analyzing in order to find the meaning of emptiness. He says, really, in order to negate inherent existence, what you need to do is to use proper procedures that investigate reality and tries to find whether there is a concrete sense of self in ourselves or the phenomena that exists. And only once you reach a conclusion, then you can rest upon your conclusion and acquaint your mind with the result of your investigation and analysis. That I was just kind of saying that I'm joking. No, I'm not hungry at all, actually. I'm totally okay. I have a cup of coffee with me, and I can stay with you guys for 2 or 3 hours more and exhaust, and by the time we're gonna end up, we're gonna be totally exhausted. Anyway, so if I then go back to what we say with respect to the real person. The person is the mere I that is merely imputed one-sidedly in dependence on the four or five aggregates. They cannot be found within the aggregates. I cannot find the real I or me within my body and mind. I am merely imputed one-sidedly in dependence upon my aggregates. When I say one-sidedly, I mean to say that it's not that there's something in the aggregates that make them suitable to be named a person. It's all coming from the mind. I'm calling this mug. It's one-sidedly from the mind, this mental designation. There's nothing here that exists inherently that makes it suitable to be called a cup. Because if there's something here within the atoms, the molecules, the structure, the shape, the size, or what have you, that makes it suitable to be called a mug, would mean that it exists from its own side as a mug. No, if there's something that makes it suitable to be called a mug, where is it? No, is it in the handle? Is it in the body of the mug? Is it in the basis of the mug? Is it in the atoms, the molecules? Is it in that space, the vacuity inside the mug? Where is it? Can I find it? That's the thing that makes it suitable for it to be called a mug. The Madhyamika Prasanka, the middle way consequence school of thought, says that it's one-sidedly, it's on the mind. We call it a mug. Goggles, swimming goggles. There's a nice swimming pool here at the hotel. And so these goggles exist as goggles as being merely imputed in depends upon this thing. There's nothing in the strap or in the left side or the right side, the connecting plastic that makes it suitable to be called goggles. They simply exist as being merely imputed one-sidedly on the mind. So I spoke of a person going from one life to the next. What is the retainer of karma? In that, how can we create actions in this life and experience the results of our actions in future lives? What carries the karma from this life to the next if the person cannot be found within the aggregates? Where is karma stored? So often we say, just when we speak about it in a loose sense, we create imprints and we place them upon our mind. Have you heard this statement before? That we leave imprints upon our mind? Kappa says that it's okay to say that. We can still say that we place imprints on our mind. But really, if we want to be more precise, more specific, the mere eye is where imprints are stored. The mere eye goes from one lifetime to the next. Very difficult to understand what it means, isn't it? When I say mere eye, I go blank. Maybe not anymore, but I guess that when you hear it for the first time, kind of you go blank. Like, what is it? What is the mere eye? I don't understand this term. I don't understand this word. What is it? Part of the problem with trying to figure out what it means is that and is so used to ignorance that it tries to reify something, to make it concrete and solid and something that I can point at. What is the mere eye? Can I see it in a very solid way? This is the point here. The middle way consequence school of thought that the mere eye is a person that exists simply by verbal designation. If you look for it, you're not going to be able to find it. If you're not looking for it, it still exists as existing just by being imputed through language and conceptions. Every moment of our life, we have a sense of self that exists. I exist. I exist every moment of my life as being merely imputed, indispensable on my body and mind. Just a sense of self. Just I and me. I exist in every moment of my life, independent upon my body and independent upon my mind. And then the time of death will come. There would be a separation between the body and mind. The body will be left behind, and my mind will continue. But my mind will continue with I that is imputed upon the mind. The I is not going to be Kartsön anymore because I will lose this label, Kartsön or Yaki Kamatsunjo. I will lose this label when I die. And I will continue on to next life. Maybe I'm going to be born a human being, a man or a woman. I will be given a name. I will have a new name. Maybe I'm going to be born as an animal. Maybe I'm going to be born in this on that. I will have a different name. But there will always be a sense of self. There will always be I or me that is imputed independence upon the basis of designation, the consciousness, the body that I will acquire in my next lifetime. We used to language. We used to, we used to think of I or me in English, for example. There are other languages that call I or me by different names. In Tibetan, it's nga, dak. In Hebrew, it's atzmi, ni. This I has different names. But there's always a sense of self. There's always I. And it doesn't also have to be defined verbally in a particular way. Like, for example, what about animals that don't use the languages that we use? If they don't use the word self or me, does it mean that they have no sense of self? What about babies in the pre-verbal states? Before they learn how to speak, do they not have a sense of self? Of course they have a sense of self. I mean, if you scare them, if you make them happy, you get a certain reaction, which is indicative of sense of self. And so there is a sense of self, an innate one that travels from one lifetime to the next. And it depends upon the consciousness that travels from one lifetime to the next. The consciousness is the basis of designation, is the basis of designation from the self. So the mere I, which is merely imputed, independence upon the mind, travels with the mind from one lifetime to the next. So the middle way consequence school of thought says that this is the real person that travels from life to life. The mere I is always present, sense of self that is always there in the different destinations that we go through in our journey through cyclic existence. There's always a sense, always an I that is merely imputed. This is the retainer of karma. But it's still okay to say, in a general sense, that karma is also placed, stored on. So then, when we bring it down to not only a sense of self, how we perceive ourselves, but also how we perceive others, we, particularly at this point in time when we have wars raging in the war and in the world around us, and we then become upset and angry and fearful and so forth. Others also appear to us as if they inherently exist. If there's just this solid sense of self, and either positive or negative. Warmongers appear to our mind as if they exist solidly as problematic people in and of themselves. And we get angry. We get upset. We become aggressive, hostile. So with the wisdom of emptiness, we analyze them also. We come to see that also with a warmonger, Netanyahu, people in Iran. Yeah, you have people that rage war, that create problems for others, for millions of people. But it's not the essence. It's not the essence of persons. As persons, they are controlled by anger, by ignorance. They create suffering for themselves. They create suffering for others. But it's not who they are in actuality. Who they are in actuality is mere persons. Their mere selves are imputed in dependence upon the body and mind. The mind is afflicted, but it doesn't have an essence. As persons, they don't have essence, and therefore they can change. Therefore, there is a possibility, there is hope for transformation. And so, when I say that there is possibility or hope for transformation, when I think of no, of Benjamin Netanyahu, it's likely that this potential is not going to be actualized in this life. No, I'm not going to go too wishy-washy about it. It's not going to be actualized in this life. But it's still there. In future lifetimes, maybe in a billion years, it can become actualized. But it's still there. It cannot be erased. It's not that the core being is a negative person, or vice versa. If you believe that they're wonderful people, this is not the core being. This is not how they exist in and of themselves on their own side. They exist as being merely imputed. And so, since I speak about being merely imputed, let's look at a unique Prasangika middle way consequence position, and I mentioned it so far. So, when you look for something, you cannot find it within its basis of designation. You cannot find the real I or me within my body and mind. But also, in a similar way, when we think of the things that we're attached to food, we're attached to sights and smells and tactile sensations and so forth. So we become hostile or averse to other things. You cannot find them within the basis of designation if you're going to look for them. You cannot find delicious chocolate within a chocolate bar, within the different pieces, within the molecules, texture, shape, size, and so forth. You cannot find it within the basis of designation. But if you don't look for it, it can still function. Agent, functionality, all are possible within the contingently imputed. And also the Madhyamika Prasanka says that persons and phenomena other than person exist by being merely imputed through language and conceptions. And since phenomena exist as being merely imputed through language and conception, there are dependently arisen phenomena. So this is where we start speaking of dependently arisen phenomena or dependent arising. So in this module, we should also speak about dependent arising. And as it often happens, we ran out of time. So we know we have 20 minutes or half an hour to speak about dependent arising. I apologize. So let's speak of dependent arising. Emptiness and inherent existence connected. Particularly from the viewpoint of the Madhyamika Prasanka in Tsongkhapa's writing, he links emptiness and dependent arising in a very nice, interesting fashion. We spoke about the fourfold reasoning as a reasoning that we can use in order to ascertain emptiness. Another type of reasoning is dependent arising. When we try to look for an essence of things, to see whether things exist by their own essence, by their own nature, as if they have this independently existing, if they exist from the on-side. Basically, we're saying that no, if something exists from its own side, it exists without depending upon others. It exists completely by itself, in and of itself, by its own power. The Madhyamika Prasanka says that it is not so because things exist in dependence on and in relation to other things. They don't exist on their own side, by their own right, by their own power. They are dependent arising. Let's look a little bit at dependent arising. Phenomena are empty of existing inherently because not they, to be they arise in dependence on others. Phenomena, but also this is another, you could say, unique twist of the middle way consequence school. They exist in dependence on others because they are empty of inherent existence, because they don't have a self-existing, a self-reliant existence. So dependent arising is called in general the king of reasoning. You might hear it often in teachings, dependent arising, the king of reasoning. It is the best reasoning for ascertaining emptiness. We'll touch upon it. Why is this the best reasoning in a second? But first of all, let's look at levels of dependent arising, level of dependency. So we spoke about it previously. Things depend upon cause and conditions. Things, not everything depends upon cause and conditions. There are permanent phenomena which do not depend upon cause and conditions, but most of the things that we see around us, at least with our senses, with our sense consciousnesses, all of those things exist and depends upon cause and conditions. So here it's maybe good to make some clarifications. We normally, in a very loose sense, we say that everything is impermanent. Well, to be more precise, not everything is impermanent. There are some phenomena which are permanent. Like, for example, emptiness is permanent. Emptiness doesn't change from moment to moment. Or, like, for example, I am a person. Do you agree that I'm a person? Me being a person doesn't change from moment to moment. In the sense that it's not that today I'm 50% person and tomorrow I'm going to be 60% a person. And the day after, maybe I'm going to be only 40% a person. I am a person. And this identity as a person doesn't change from moment to moment. As a person, I do change from moment to moment, of course. I get old, I get sick, at some point I will die. So Kartsön Yaki changes from moment to moment, but being a person doesn't change from moment to moment. In this life, for example, I was born as a man, having many beats. I'm not going to go into that. But it's not that being man in this life, this identity of being man changes from moment to moment. It's not that I'm 50% a man when I'm 10 years old and then 100% man when I'm an adult. This identity of being something is permanent so long as I am alive in this life, so long as this body of life. After all, you can say that being a man very much also depends upon, if we put aside for the time being the whole issue of gender and sex, in general, no, just want to speak about it in general. You can say that, no, I was born in this life with a body of a man, and when this body dies, this identity will cease to exist. It will go out of existence. But so long as as I stay alive with this body, being a man doesn't change from moment to moment. It is permanent. It is permanent in that it doesn't depend upon cause and conditions that alter, that change who I am from moment to moment. Greg says, emptiness is like the infinity that infinity equals infinity. I'm not sure that I get what you're saying. Any changes to emptiness, multiply, added, etc. Emptiness is still equals emptiness. Emptiness is permanent in that it doesn't change from moment to moment. So, for example, there is my emptiness of inherent existence. I, as a person, I change from moment to moment. I grow, I develop, I age, I die. I change from moment to moment. But my emptiness doesn't change from moment to moment. It is permanent. It is permanent because it is not created by cause and conditions. If you think of, for example, if you think of the implications of emptiness supposedly being impermanent and not permanent, would have meant that emptiness is created. It would have meant that, for example, I was once upon a time inherently existing person, and then emptiness was created in some process, and I became empty of inherent existence. That would be an absurd consequence to emptiness being created by cause and conditions. Emptiness is not created by cause and conditions. There's no like a generally flowing in midair, floating in midair emptiness that does not depend upon something, that is not the emptiness of something. Emptiness is always an emptiness of something. It's the emptiness of me, it's the emptiness of the cup, it is the emptiness of the goggles, it is the emptiness of Matt, of Bree, of Cynthia, and so forth. It's always an emptiness of something. And so the basis for emptiness changes from moment to moment, or can change from moment to moment, or it can be often, if we become really fastidious and philosophical about it, and speak about the emptiness of emptiness. I don't know if it really helps you, but the basis of emptiness can be a permanent thing. Let's leave that aside. We don't have to kind of become too heady. I, as a person, I change from moment to moment. So long as I exist, my emptiness also exists. When I die, when that person called Kartsön dies, you can say that also my emptiness will cease to exist. It will not cease to exist because it depends upon cause and condition. It will cease to exist because the basis is no longer there. This cup was forged, it was formed when it came into existence, its emptiness of inherent existence came into existence simultaneously with it because it's a feature, it's an attribute of this mug. If I drop this mug and it smashes, it will no longer exist. And its emptiness will also cease to exist because the basis is no longer there. Emptiness is always an emptiness of something. It is not like a universal emptiness that is floating in midair independently from anything else. It's always an emptiness in relation to a base. When the basis is to exist, emptiness goes out of existence. So long as it exists as an emptiness of something, that emptiness of something will always be permanent. It doesn't change because it does not depend upon cause and consequence. And so, Jay says, dependently arising, the emptiness is often described as the permanence of impermanence, depending on the fact that things are impermanent, yet the truth itself does not change. Emptiness is permanent. It can be emptiness of something, emptiness of an impermanent thing. Okay. And so, dependent arising. You have the first level of dependency, cause and conditions. Second level of dependency is part. Things dependently arise because they depend upon parts. For example, when we think of Apa, with a body, mind, these are parts of myself in this life. Also, I can speak about parts in relation to time. There's me of yesterday, there's me of 2 days ago, there's me when I was 14 years old. All of them also, you can say, parts of me in terms of. But when I look at the phenomena, like for example, this mug, it has a handle, it has a body, it has a surface. These are parts. And the cup is a dependent arising in that it depends upon its part. It doesn't exist independently from its parts. It depends upon its part. So that's the second level of dependent. And the third level of dependent arising, which is related to many of the things that we said today, things come into existence contingently upon imputations. Like, for example, when we think of the process of naming, so I assume that many of you have kids. Maybe not all of you, but many of you. So maybe some of you have decided upon a name of a child before they were born. Often it is like that when someone is being born. You have, this blubbering baby, a lump of baby in front of you. And then you decide how you're going to name the baby. So I was born in 1971. I don't think that my mom had an ultrasound, was born. I think that she didn't know X before. I was born, then my parents discovered that they have another boy, second born baby, boy. And then they decided how to name the baby. So I come into being as Yaki. Well, actually, my name was, parents didn't call me by my ordination name. They called me Yaakov. So Yaakov came into being and depends upon contingent imputation. Contingent in that there was a body, there was a baby, there was a person, and they were given a name. And then Yaakov came into being. Before that, I was just a baby. Or I can speak about, for example, my process of ordination. I was ordained by Tai Situ Rinpoche. Often when we get a name, either name of ordination or refuge name, we think that there is, we would like to hope that there is some divine intervention where we get the name that is suited to us. yeah, maybe it's true. But to be honest, I got to take together with 150 other people, like big ordination ceremony with Tai Sitter and Pache. And somewhere in that ordination ceremony, his assistant was going around with a bag full of with names, and I just pulled a name on a plastic bag. Process of labeling. Anyway, I got a new name, ordination name, Karma Tsundru Taye, and I shortened Karma and Tsundru into Kartsön. First syllable from Karma, first syllable from Tsundru, you get Kartsön. Anyway, Kartsön came into existence at that moment. It came into existence by labeling Kartsön and Yaakov. That's my other name, my name that my parents gave me, Yaki or Yaakov. But also you can say that Kartsön is labeled upon this body. It is a contingent imputation. Things come into existence, labeling them. Tsundru did not exist before he was given the name. Yaakov existed. That person existed. They existed before that, but not as Kartsön. I come into existence as Kartsön by calling me Kartsön. That's the contingent imputation that I'm speaking about here in the level of dependent arising. So when you think about it also in relation to someone that you regard as an enemy, you regard them as enemy when your mind labels them as enemy. So this whole notion of enemy, of an aggressor, and so forth, comes into being through mental imputation. And of course, there's something that they might have harmed you in the past and might harm you at the present. They are acting in a certain way that is harmful to you. So there is a basis for calling them an enemy. But enemy comes into being as an enemy through a process of mental imputation. I don't like them. They're harming me. They are my enemy. If you look for enemy within the basis of designation, within the body and mind, you don't find enemy, an independently existing enemy that is independent from the body and mind. And yet an enemy comes to being through a process of mental designation, mental imputation. So we connected with inherent existence. A person does not exist inherently because they depend upon cause and conditions, because they depend upon their path, because their arising depends upon contingent imputation. And so we connect inherent existence and dependent arising. Or the absence of inherent existence, the absence of inherent existence with dependent arising. What we're negating is things having an essence, a nature, an intrinsic identity that makes them what they are, in and of themselves, by their own power. Here, the Madhyamika Prasanka school of thought says that things do not have this entity because they are dependent arising, because their arising depends upon cause and conditions, because they exist depending upon their parts, and because they come into being and depends upon mental designations. Oh, sorry. Because they come into being and depends upon being imputed. And if you look for them, if you try to find them within the base of designation, you will not be able to find them. They dependently arise, dependent arising. But not only, we're speaking about things which are material things, which are imputed. Like, for example, this pair of goggles, this is a material thing. It is called goggle. It depends upon its base of designation, the strap, the goggles. No, it comes into being and depends upon this as goggles. If I'm going to take the different elements, the different parts, cut the strap into tiny bits, 100 tiny bits, and break this, what do you call them? Is that the actual goggle? Anyway, the eye house, and the nose strap, if you break it into pieces, it would no longer be goggles, or it would be just pieces of something that used to be goggles, but it is no longer goggles. It comes into being as goggles. It depends upon mental designation. It is goggles. It depends upon cause and conditions. It is goggles. It depends upon the strap. These two eye houses and the nose strap. These are the parts. Independent upon the parts, there are goggles. It depends upon me calling it goggles. It exists. And it functions also as goggles. It has the ability to do so. But there's no intrinsically existing goggles that I can find when I look for it within its basis of designation. So everything is dependent arising. Everything exists depending upon its parts, depends upon cause and conditions, and depends upon mental designations. It sounds in some ways simple, but how does it help us? What's the point? Well, the point is that although intellectually we do understand that things arise in depends upon cause and conditions, and might be more complicated or difficult to think of them as arising depending upon the parts or upon mental designation, mental imputation. We might understand that intellectually, and yet we react to the world around us in still trying to reify things to make them concrete, intrinsic, and independent. Our ignorance believes wholeheartedly that they do not arise in dependence upon others, but they exist in and of themselves. This is the story that ignorance tells our mind, and anger and attachment arise based upon this story that ignorance tells us. And so when we encounter different situations in our life, and for example, we think that there is no hope for us because world politics in the world is so difficult. America is falling apart. Israel is falling apart. There's war in the Middle East. There's war in the Ukraine. There's things in Africa and South Sudan and Congo are horrible. It appears to my partner, I can't deal with them. It's so difficult. Or the person that I love. It's just, if only I would get into a relationship with them, my life would be wonderful and happy. If only I'd be rich. If only I had a big, comfortable house, I'd be able to be forever happy. Our ignorance reifies things, makes them concrete and independent. They're not like that. They are dependently arisen phenomena. And therefore, they depend upon cause and conditions, which means that they can change. Maybe not now, but they can change. They can come into existence and they can go out of existence. Currently, they might be wonderful, but they can change. Currently, they are horrible, they can change. They depend upon parts. They depend upon the way that my mind designates them as being wonderful or being horrible. So there is a great possibility for change because things are dependent arising. They don't have their own intrinsic identity. So this reason of dependent arising is held as the king of reasoning because in one reason, using the reason of dependent origination, you can negate two extreme views. And the extreme views are either an eternalistic view or nihilistic view. So we spoke about ignorance, believing wholeheartedly that things exist inherently. inherent existence is called an view of eternalism, eminence. So when we understand that things do not exist inherently, we negate an eternalistic view, an extreme view. But also when we use the reason of dependent arising, and we understand that things come into existence because they depend upon cause and conditions, because they depend upon parts, because they depend upon mental designations, we also affirm their existence. We don't become nihilistic in saying that nothing whatsoever exists, that things exist because they arise and depends upon cause and condition, parts, and mental designation. So in one go, within dependent arising, we refute inherent existence, an extreme eternalistic permanent view, the view of permanent. But also we do not become nihilistic in thinking that nothing exists, that it does exist, things exist independently, independence upon others. So, does your head hurt? Do you feel really heavy? Khalid says no. That's a good option. Yes. Well, I can recommend some medication if your head hurts. Paracetamol. Um, it's a difficult topic, and I think that as it often happens, we have certain things, certain topics that we need to cover, and I ran out of time. Trying to race through the last few points. I was also hoping or planning for having a guided meditation on emptiness using the fourfold reasoning, but no, we ran out of time. And so I think that what we'll try to do in the next few days, in the next couple of weeks, I will record a meditation and I will send the link to Dundrup, Venerable Dundrup, and I will ask him to send the link to you. So that I will repent failing. And so I think that someone said that they wanted to ask something. Maybe not. I see Nan putting a hand up. Nan from Santa Fe.
Okay, so does the fact that we take an adjective like empty and make it a noun like emptiness confuse things? I mean, we take happy and we know that happy doesn't exist independently. And when we think of it as an adjective, as a description, and we can understand that happiness arises dependently.
Yeah. I'm wondering whether it is correct to say that you turn empty into an adjective by saying emptiness, because I think I get a sense that
it's the other way around.
The other way around. Okay.
Yeah, empty is the adjective. Okay. Emptiness is the noun.
All right. So now we agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. Yeah. So emptiness is a noun. Yeah. It is an abstract. Maybe you say. I don't know if you say an abstract, but
yes.
Yeah. But certainly it is a noun. I think that the danger is that when we just speak of empty, people think to. And this is where the confusion arises. When we use the word empty, people get the idea that it means vacuity, void, something that is vacuum, void. So it becomes, in some sense, a tangible thing. Whereas emptiness as a noun means that we have negated something. It is a negation of, more specifically, a non-affirming negation. So it's not just a state of vacuity in which we clear our mind of all thoughts and so forth. It's rather that we negate. It's a negation of a certain mode of existence that is an impossible mode of existence. So yeah, you're right about it.
Well, to be continued. Thank you very much, Venerable.
No worries. Thank you. And so we ran out of time, and um, there's a question. I think that Cynthia or maybe Scarlett wanted to clarify what is the thing that I'm going to be emailing Dundrup. So I'm going to record. I'm going to record a guided meditation on emptiness using the fourfold reasoning, and maybe I will throw into the mix depend arising. And so I will try to do that and email it to that recording to Dundrup so that you guys can also use that maybe as a useful material. I apologize for not being able to do it in this session. And so let's conclude this session. It was, as always, it was a pleasure to meet again online with the folks of Upton Nobling. This is a great platform. And we were able to meet just for 6 sessions, which is not a lot. It's actually quite, just a few sessions trying to maybe clarify what emptiness is. And I think that many of you, including myself, are still have many doubts and questions and lack of understanding, vagueness, and so forth. And of course, we would have that still happening because it is a complicated topic. But we are, if we get ourselves the time, and be also forgiving with ourselves. When you study this topic in a monastic environment, Gelugpa monastic environment, you study this in depth for 4 years. But we're not going to be able to make it crystal clear just with it, in 6 sessions. Or when we continue to read and investigate and so forth, we are taking steps. We are making some headways. We are giving rise to interest and investigation so that hopefully in the future we'll be able to become more clear about emptiness and also then take the view of emptiness and integrate that into the way that we relate to ourselves and the way that we relate to others. So that it will become useful. So may we be able to do it together in the future again. And also I wanted to thank each and every one of you for coming along and also bringing up questions and clarifications. It helps everyone. It helps me. It helps you. So thank you very much for doing so. Thank you very much for Sheila. Hopefully the drugs will kick in soon and you recover soon. And also Cynthia and all other people that have made it possible for us to meet today. All the people from Tupten Nobling Center behind the scene, thank you very much. And may we be able to do it again and again. So let's finish up with a dedication prayer. We again dedicate a merit not only for the flourishing of bodhicitta, for the flourishing of the view of emptiness in our mind stream. And so I'll put the prayer of us on the screen. And that the prayers went into, state of acuity. Okay. And so thinking of all the merit, the virtue that we have created together, it will not go to waste. May we be able to utilize all the merit and the virtue that we have created together here in the 6 session meetings that we had, but also from other areas in your life, any good positive action that you have created, that you are creating, that your friends have been creating. May all of this help us to forge bodhicitta in our mind stream. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that is not a reason arise and grow. And may that which is arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. And the same thing with the view of emptiness. May the supreme view of emptiness that is not arisen, arising. And may that which is arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. May we take our understanding and realization of emptiness to a higher and higher level, so that may we be able to completely eliminate our ignorance and the negative karma that we have been creating. And due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha, with all living beings without exception, into that enlightened state. We also dedicate for the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all of our spiritual teachers, past, present, and future. May the wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewels, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso and all of our spiritual teachers, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. And the holy wishes are wishes for the benefit and well-being of everyone else. And we also finish up with hoping, aspiring, may the reincarnation of Lama Zopa Rinpoche be identified. May they get all the training that they need in order to become full-blown masters, that continue to lead all the people, not only in the FPMT organizations, but also in other areas of life, into positive states, into the state of liberation, into the state of Amen. Okay. And so thank you very much, people. Have a good evening. Have a good night.